Welcome to The Next Level, conversations that propel business. The next hour is all about the entrepreneur, why they start businesses, how they make their businesses grow, how they overcome failures and achieve success. Your host, Bob Gibbons, founder of Riata Commercial Realty, a commercial real estate advisory and tenant advocacy firm. Bob will ask probing questions to find impactful solutions that will help take your business to the next level. And now, here's Bob Gibbons.
Welcome to The Next Level, conversations that propel business. This is your host, Bob Gibbons, and I'm excited today. We have a guest by the name of Dan Stevens with Kickbox. I love that name, Kickbox. I'm anxious to talk about that. And we were introduced to Dan by my son, Carson Gibbons. So Carson's a past guest on the show. So shout out to him for arranging this guest. We're looking forward to it. So Dan started Kickbox, and he's started several companies, MX Force, LLC, Send Technologies, etc. And everything seems to be related to email. Making sure it's safe, making sure it's scrubbed, that clutter-free, make sure you filter emails, or just all kinds of things related to email. So we're going to get into all of that here in just a minute. So welcome to the show, Dan. Glad you're here.
Glad to be here.
So before we get into all that, tell me where you're from, where you grew up, a little bit about your background.
Yeah, so I was born in Plano.
Oh.
Did most of my growing up in Minnesota, though. So I had that nice Minnesota accent. No, I don't want to go on the boat. Then came back to Texas, Houston, at age 11. Lost my Minnesota accent and did all my middle school, high school in Texas. Went to Baylor for college and met my wife. And then we just kind of eeny, meeny, miny mode and landed in Dallas, where we've been for about 12 years now.
Nice.
Yeah.
So Baylor, what is your degree in Baylor?
Entrepreneurship.
Oh, really?
Yeah.
Now, why that specifically?
That's what I always wanted to do since I was a little kid. My great-grandfather was an inventor, and I really idolized him. And my dad was this really great businessman, and I idolized him as well. And then I learned probably about age 6 or so that there's a thing you can invent. You can invent businesses, and that's called entrepreneurship. And that's just kind of what I always wanted to do. And Baylor had one of the top 5 entrepreneurship programs at the time. I think there was only 5 programs in the nation at the time. I don't know, but so went to Baylor and went through that program, and it was a really cool experience.
So you figured that out at age 6 that you could invent a company.
Yeah.
What occurred at that point that clued you into that?
Well, I don't remember the exact event. All I know is that at age 6, that's when I started creating my first businesses. My very first one was a karate dojo in my bedroom. For 1 cent, I would give karate lessons. I didn't know any karate, and no one ever showed up. But it was my first venture, so to speak.
So you'd get the neighbor kids to come in, and you would say, "This is how you do it." And
that was the idea, but no one ever showed up. So, but did the whole lemonade stand and various things like that, of course, as a kid too.
So you figured this out by what you were doing, not necessarily by what your dad or granddad were doing.
Right. Yeah. I've learned through the course of creating all these little kid businesses that was called entrepreneurship. Yeah.
Yeah. Interesting. So
Yeah.
what was your grandfather inventing?
He was working on World War II technology, like searchlights and spotlights for aircraft to help them land and things like that, and fog and various things like that. So
Did he start a company, or did he work for another company?
I think he worked for the government.
Okay.
Yeah, building technology for the war effort.
Interesting. And your father?
He was in sales for 3M.
Okay.
And yeah, very, very genuine, honest sales guy. And so that, has built my affinity towards the sales process of people who are just good people and are just being around being good people, as opposed to the salesman who's real slick and trying to, find a way to wiggle in and and sell you something that you don't need.
I mean, is that your? Do you think that one of those two impressions of sales is more prevalent in reality?
Oh yeah, the slick-haired sales guy is the default. This is the de facto standard, and I think pretty much everybody hates that type of salesperson. But
It's certainly the stereotype.
it is the stereotype.
But have you found that to actually be the case in practice?
Oh, I mean, in my business, we see we have spammers, so we have people who are that, but it's via email instead of calling you up.
Right.
But it's the same sort of thing. So yeah, I see it a lot. But there's a lot of good, genuine people too. So
Yeah. When I look at salespeople, the good ones find a need and find a way to fill it.
yeah,
And a lot of, entrepreneurs do the same thing, right? So, you've got to find something people need before you can figure out how to fill it.
Yep.
And then trying to get that word out, trying to help them is sales. It's just how you go about that determines whether it's slick and stereotypical or whether it's genuine and good.
exactly.
So, well, very cool. So you're doing these little kid businesses. Did you ever do anything that really turned into something more significant as a kid?
Nope, all my kid businesses were a colossal failure. I think somewhere along the lines of having like $7 a week in capital to invest in the business was a little bit crippling. But
That's more than a lot of us got.
yeah, but,
Yeah, well, I mean, whenever you think about the kid businesses, though, I mean, the point of those are not to build something,
Sure.
That then can be sold. The point of them really is to learn how to manage money,
yeah,
how to handle money, and how to create money and that kind of thing. So, I think they serve a really cool purpose.
Oh, yeah.
But it's a totally different thing than, of course, when we get to be older, get to be adults. So, when you were at Baylor, were you working at the same time you were going to school then?
yeah. I worked for a company in Temple, Texas. That was a chalkboard manufacturing company. Really cool company to work for. The people there were just awesome people. And that's actually kind of how I got into email. They had a spam problem like every company did back in the early 2000s, like 2002, 2003. And I would install a spam filter for them, and that would kind of fix the problem for about a week. And then spam was always evolving, so it would find a way around the spam filters, and I'd have to either change spam filters, add new spam filters, take spam filters away, and things like that. And then I had the bright idea of, well, what if I managed this for a whole bunch of various companies as a managed service, or SaaS, as we now call
Sure.
it, or a cloud application. And so when I graduated, I quit my job and I built that business, launched it. And that was MX Force, my anti-spam company. And quickly found out that I was entrepreneur number 9,407 to think of that idea. Didn't really do any market research, but we managed to find a niche and bring it to an exit.
Really? So, I mean, in that situation, were you just using somebody else's spam filter tools and software to then implement?
We built some of our own, and we used third parties as well, and we just kind of managed that and kind of swapped it out on a per threat basis, per customer basis. Yeah.
Interesting.
Yeah.
So, did you do that in Dallas, or were you still down in Waco, or what?
The first year was in Waco, then we moved to Dallas. Yeah.
And why did you move to Dallas?
My wife's family is in Oklahoma, and my family's in Houston, and so it was a good midpoint.
So, were you already married?
Yes. Yeah, we got married right out of college. Yeah.
Oh, wow.
Yeah.
So, you were like 22, 23 years old
Yeah.
or something?
That's the way you do it in Baylor. Yeah. So,
Well, I too was 23, but I
Yeah.
didn't go to Baylor.
yeah.
I was 6 months out of college, I guess, when
Yeah.
I got
Yeah, me too.
married. Which, it was a great thing.
It
But
works, yeah.
so, all right, so you guys moved to Dallas.
Mhm.
How did you go about getting clients at that point?
Yeah, so the first challenge was, we graduated and we were dirt poor. So we didn't really have any capital to invest. So had to do a little bit of friends and family capital raise. And my father-in-law is an entrepreneur, so I got the privilege of asking him for money and call him up and be like, "Hey, I'm supposed to take care of your daughter, but can I have some money?"
Loser.
Yeah, and he was like, "Sure." And he gave us an investment, and we gave him equity, and it worked out. I think he's got about a 10x on his investment at this point, so that worked out. But We built the business from just two investors really. Took on a business partner as well who helped me grow it and kind of had his expertise. He's actually the guy who got me my job at the chalkboard manufacturing company. He became my partner.
Okay.
And we just kind of kept our nose down. We found our niche, which was really working with like web hosts and ISPs, small ones, and we were their solution in the back end. So we were their anti-spam solution as opposed to working with individual small to medium businesses.
Oh, okay. So instead of coming to me as a business owner, I'm building whatever,
Right.
building cabinets, I'm selling widgets, whatever it is. Instead of you trying to sell me, hey, I can keep all this spam out of your inbox, you're going to the ISPs, the providers, and saying, this is a value add to you.
Right.
And is that because it gave them the ability to then compete more effectively for my business as an end user because that was built in, or
Yeah,
was it?
it was a value add, and it was also just one less thing for them to deal with. Yeah. So
I mean, I would have thought that would have been something that would have been automatic, that they would have been providing or would have already known how to provide just by nature of being an ISP.
right.
But no?
We were all figuring it out back in the early 2000s. So it's something now that's very automatic. It's very well refined, and it's just kind of on by default. But back then, it was very much a necessary technology, a very quickly evolving threat, and everyone was just trying to figure out the best techniques to fix it.
Interesting.
Yeah.
So ISPs, how many are there?
Well, I mean, you have the big ones. Of course, we didn't really have any of the big, like the AOLs or Verizon or anything like that. But there are thousands of mom and pop shops, especially in rural areas where they have wireless ISPs and things like that. So we had hundreds of those types of customers.
So like I have friends that have a place up in Colorado,
Mm-hmm.
reasonably remote, small town.
Mm-hmm.
And so there's somebody who put up a antenna and a dish, and that's who they get their internet from. But that's not an ISP, is it? Or is it?
Yeah, that's an ISP.
Okay, so that would be an example of somebody that could have potentially been your client.
Yeah, might
So
have
how
been.
did you find them?
Google AdWords, SEO, just kind of the just very primitive marketing. We didn't really have a staff for the first 5 or 6 years of the company. It was just my business partner and I. So just kind of grassroots, pounding the pavement.
Huh. But you're doing all that virtually.
Yep, exactly.
Interesting. Okay. We're going to take a break. We'll be right back. You're listening to The Next Level on 1190.
Hi, my name is Fern, and I've been an empowered team member at Alkali for over 5 years. I first learned about Alkali through an online job board and was intrigued to learn that Alkali was a Dave Ramsey endorsed local provider. But what captivated me was Alkali's mission statement, which is closely aligned with my own beliefs. So what's kept me at Alkali for over 5 years? First, Alkali's 5 core values match my own. Second, I've been empowered to use my unique abilities to impact our community, our clients, and Alkali. If you'd like to learn more about becoming an empowered Alkali team member, visit our website, alkaliservices.com. That's ALKALI services.com.
Welcome back to The Next Level. So Dan, you were telling us about the start of your company and the MX Force and how you were finding these ISPs. So was there enough of them to really build a legit business that would scale to where you could sell it? You mentioned that you were able to sell it. So
Yeah.
I guess the answer to that is yes, but walk us through that.
Yeah, so it was about 12 years in when we finally had our exit. So it took a long time, and it was a very, very slow grow. So yeah, we did get to an exit. It wasn't anything that was, making headlines as far as the size of it or anything, but we got a good return for our investors. It was a decent return, but many lessons were learned for future businesses and things what not to do. And one of those things is how we invest in sales and marketing, and to actually invest more heavily in those things so you don't have this very slow, drawn-out growth.
Okay.
So that was one of the areas that we kind of one of the mistakes we learned from.
So what would you have done differently then? You know, if you say you don't want that slow growth and you would have invested more, how would you have spent that money?
I would have, I think a sales and marketing team, even just by team, I mean one person in sales, one person in marketing, because it was a company run by 2 tech people, and we dealt with customers when we had to, and we sold and marketed and all that sort of stuff when we had to, but we loved working with the technology. So our heads were down the entire time building something really great, but only when somebody would tap us on the shoulder would we really pay them any attention. So,
Hey, there's a customer, you might want to talk to them.
exactly. So, you know, and it was good to recognize what my passion is. It really is around technology, and doing the sales and marketing stuff is not one of my strengths or passions. And investing in that would have definitely helped quite a bit. So that was one of the lessons.
So just having another body who's really, that's their sole function.
That's their passion. That's what they're excited about doing. Yeah, that would have been great.
So you were just too distracted and you had too many things to do and couldn't. So by having that person hired, you would have ramped and scaled better, faster.
Yeah, I think so.
Interesting. Okay. And so going back to the technology for a minute, you said that your degree was in entrepreneurship.
Mm-hmm.
So how did you know how to do this technologically?
That was just one of those things where I think it's, you know, millions of boys and girls have a similar story where they got a computer as a kid and they just sat in front of it and it just blew their mind. And, you know, from age, I don't know, 7 or 8, when I had an Apple II, from that point on, I was downstairs learning how to tinker with it. At first, it was just, you know, drawing things and writing little stories. And then when we got a PC, it was learning how to program and largely self-taught how to program. I think that was just something that was very interesting to me from a very young age. When many of my peers were playing video games, I was trying to write video games. Granted, they were like tic-tac-toe and, you know, things very primitive, but that's what really piqued my interest as a kid. Yeah.
Well, you got to start somewhere.
Yeah.
So what were you programming? You said tic-tac-toe, but I mean,
Mm-hmm.
was there other things that you were programming or like solutions for your parents for anything they were doing? Or
Yeah, I didn't really do anything for my parents.
stayed out of the way.
I did things for me, but yeah. The internet, of course, came around about my middle school time, and at that point, I stopped with the tic-tac-toe type of games and immediately started developing web pages. We had web page competitions at my middle school and high school, and that was always a very, very fun time. So I would spend basically my entire year ramping up for this web page competition.
Wow.
And building various things on whatever I was interested in at the time, drums or weather patterns or whatever it was that piqued my interest that year. I'd build some websites around it, and that helped kind of set that foundation of programming as well.
So what were were these websites in the competition, were they required to actually do something, or was it just like a static page showing what it could do?
Yeah, so that was one of the cool things. The very beginning at the web page competitions, it was the early days of the internet, and there was nothing that web pages could do really other than exist. And you could click a link, and it could go to that link.
So it's an electronic brochure kind of thing.
Exactly.
just a
And
page.
then at the end of my high school career, then JavaScript was out and pretty well established, and you could actually do something. So my entry for senior year was rockandrums.com, and it was a drum set that you could actually play by clicking around on it. You can make MIDI files of drum beats and do various other JavaScript type of front end things on it, and that was a real just eye opener, and it was state of the art technology in 1998.
Yeah, I bet
Yeah.
it would be. Well, you know, I remember whenever I lived in Austin in like 89, 90, 91, I had all these friends who were tech people, all these neighbors in my neighborhood, and they would be in their houses at night in the spare bedroom, and I'd see this kind of blue glow going on in there. And I asked them one time, I was like, what are you guys doing in there? There was this husband and wife, this one particular couple that I am thinking of, and they were both kind of techie people.
Yep.
And they were saying, well, we're working on the internet. And I was like, what is that? I mean, it was like,
Nerds. Yeah.
I mean, I had no clue
Yeah.
what it was, and they tried to explain it, and it just did not sink in.
Yeah.
But I'm also the guy that when email was first explained to me, I thought, come on, really? Who's going to use that?
Yeah. Yeah.
I wish I still didn't have as much of that as I do. Now I can't live without it, unfortunately. But yeah, it's interesting to see how people adopt things and how hard it is for some of us to sort of get that vision, and other people it's just so automatic. And I don't know what the answer to that is. How come that is? Is that
Right.
just because you're growing up with it, you're exposed to something, or your mind just works that way?
Probably a little bit all of the above. And yeah, I think growing up with it is a big one, though. I think I just happened to pop onto the earth at a really cool time, just the dawn of the information age, which I count myself very fortunate. And, I happen to be very interested in it as well. And but yeah, I think that's one of the things that's super important as a parent now, is to encourage your kids to get interested in technology, at least at a high level. Get them introduced to programming and things like that, just to see if that's a passion of theirs. And it's just a really cool educational piece too.
So given this background as a kid, why didn't you go computer science or information technologies as a degree in college?
Well, so I did also get a degree in business information systems, which was
Oh.
kind of, it's kind of it had programming courses and things like that, but also a lot of Excel spreadsheets and various things. But I wanted to do computer science. That's a very involved major, and I really wanted to do entrepreneurship, which is a very involved major. So I could kind of pick one very involved major and run with it. And I knew I wanted to be a businessman, and I knew I had largely self-taught myself in the computer science area to date, with varying degrees of success. So I thought that I wanted to learn how to be an entrepreneur first.
Well, that makes sense.
Yeah.
So, so you said you got the degree in entrepreneurship, but you also just said you got another degree in business information technology. Was that at the same time?
Yeah.
Okay, so it was like a dual major?
Yep.
Wow. Smart guy. So when you sold out of MX Force, how big was it at that point in terms of people or whatever?
Just about 4 people. So we went from
Okay.
2 to 4 people.
And you were able to, what kind of a company bought it?
This is a company called J2 Global. They're the eFax people. They made a lot of acquisitions in the email space and anti-spam space.
Okay.
I think they're starting to suspect that maybe faxing is on its way out, and seeing that email is still growing. So we were fortunate enough for them to see that, and one of their customers, who was an ISP essentially, or one of their acquisitions was an ISP that they were our customer, and they basically said, you need to take a look at MX Force because that's who we use for all of our anti-spam technology.
Nice.
So that kind of led into everything else there.
So how long ago was this that you sold that?
That was in 2016, early 2017.
Well, it's
Yeah,
it's not
so
that long
hot
ago,
off the
18
press.
months ago.
Yeah.
Very nice.
Yeah.
Well, congratulations on
Thanks.
that.
Yeah.
So you had investors in MX Force. You mentioned your father-in-law, of course.
Yep.
You and your partner.
Yep.
Did you raise money in other ways?
Not for MX Force. No, we built, using the revenues from MX Force, we built Send Inc., which is our email encryption platform. That took on outside investment, and that was also acquired as a part of the J2 deal.
But it was a separate entity from MX?
Yeah, it was wholly owned by MX Force at first, and then it took on investors, and the cap table changed a little bit.
So now why was that set up as a separate entity from MX?
MX Force was anti-spam, and Send Inc. was, and again, it was geared towards the ISPs, and then Send Inc. was email encryption, and it was geared towards small to medium businesses. So
The end user.
yeah, exactly. Very different markets. So we set them up as different companies to target those.
Okay. So how far into the first company, MX Force, was it before you decided to start the Send Inc.?
3 years. 3 years in when we started Send Inc. And we really just kind of built it and tabled it for a couple of years. We just never really launched it completely. We had like a beta out. And then I think in 2010, so about 5 years after we started MX Forces, when we did a kind of a proper launch, and worked on the sales and marketing and all that sort of fun stuff to it, and it grew pretty well. It grew faster and to greater heights than MX Force, and it was kind of MX Force's. It kind of started carrying MX Force more than MX Force was carrying it. So
Okay.
yeah.
So you had MX Force was on the ISP side,
Mm-hmm.
SendInc is on the end user side.
Yep.
So you're kind of covering both ends of that spectrum
Yeah.
at the same time.
Yeah.
So that makes a lot of sense. And so you raised money for SendInc though.
Yeah.
So had different investors and all that. So when you went to sell both of them, I imagine that was a bit of a complicated transaction. And let's pick that up on the other side of the break. We're back on the next level. We're here with Dan Stevens with Kickbox. So we were talking about the sale of MX Force and SendInc.
Mhm.
So talk to us about how to sell two separate entities with a different cap table at the same time to the same buyer.
Yeah, so that definitely can cause complications. Fortunately for us, we really had one outside investor, Green Park and Golf Ventures, which is here in Dallas. And they're super great guys. They've always had a good ear to the ground of what we were working on, have always been very available to us. And so it really wasn't all that complicated of a transaction. It was just, we negotiated a good price. Green Park and Golf helped along those lines too, offering their expertise and, what a good valuation would be. And we kind of bounced back and forth a little bit on that and agreed on a price, and the deal was done. So it was actually pretty straightforward.
So if your cap table that your investors on MX had been outside investors as
Mhm.
opposed to, the founders and family,
Right.
would that have changed things, you think, or would it have been just as easy?
I don't think it would have changed things too much. Obviously, if you take too much capital, you take you're on your series C9 or whatever, and now you have to exit at a ridiculous valuation that you may never get. That's the nightmare situation everybody wants to avoid. But fortunately for us, we just took relatively small amount of capital, just basically what we needed and nothing else. And so it made an exit feasible.
So whenever you were starting SendInc, were all the investors in MX also investors in SendInc, and then you just took on an additional outside investor?
Exactly, yes.
Okay, so you still had some alignment there
Mm-hmm.
in the investors. So if you had a totally different cap table
Right.
with totally different investors, people have different goals and objectives, timeframes, et cetera, that I can see how that could get a lot more
That would have been
difficult.
weird. Yeah, exactly.
Okay. So you sell MX, you sell SendInc, both to the same entity.
Mhm.
They're happy. You didn't have to stay with the company?
Nope, they wanted the technology for that acquisition.
Okay.
Yep.
So you said you had like 4 employees or something like that at that
Yeah.
point. So those employees, did they go with that company or did they stick with you?
No, some stuck with me. Some we just gave a nice bonus to, and sent them along. And it was a pretty amenable situation.
So did you know what you were going to do next, or had you already started on the next thing?
Yeah, so we'd already started on Kickbox, which was started in 2014. So I guess we were about 2.5. But yeah, it's about 2.5 years into that venture at that point. And we started Kickbox because we started a voiceover. I always try and start businesses, and started a voiceover IP company. I want to say in 2012. And long story short, it tanked. It tanked real hard.
Really?
And the main reason was a huge amount of fraud, just fake users signing up by the millions. I think we had about 10 million signups when it was all said and done, but they're almost all fake.
I don't understand. Why would somebody sign up for a voice over internet service as a fake? I don't understand.
All sorts of reason to make prank phone calls, to make we had terror threats called in their networks. We had the FBI subpoenaing our records for it, and just you name it, people were using it. And some people just to call their girlfriend overseas for cheap. You create a whole bunch of fake accounts, get a couple free minutes essentially as a trial,
Oh, I see.
and make those phone calls.
So it wasn't that they were fake, as in, virtual or robots. It wasn't a bot thing. It was
Right.
real people that were signing up just to get some freebie
Exactly.
on the front end, and then they would never pay.
Exactly.
I get you.
Yeah, so we started that voice over IP company, huge amounts of fraud, and one of our efforts was to stop all the fake account signups. And we tried a bunch of technologies that made sure the email addresses people were entering in were real, and none of them really worked all that well. And meanwhile, my anti-spam company was still running, and it had a very large email backbone that was processing millions of emails an hour and had been for a decade at that point. So we thought, well, what if we verify these email addresses using this network, and how well would that work? And it worked perfectly. So we just kind of set that aside and continued driving the voice over IP company into the ground. And then we were looking for something to do next, and we thought, well, maybe we can kind of productize this email verification technology until we can think of a better idea. And that's what we did, and it immediately started getting traction with large enterprises, some of the world's largest dating websites, travel, gaming, social, you name it. They just kind of jumped on board, just kind of fell into our lap with very little effort. And so my pessimism of, this is something until I have a better idea, over to I think this is the next big idea. It kind of transitioned over maybe a 6-month period, and we started working on growing Kickbox out, and that's how Kickbox came about.
Interesting. I love when the failure of one thing sparks something else that really takes off.
Yeah.
That's kind of fun. So whenever you get this idea, it's still related to email. There seems to be
Yeah.
a thread in your career. It's always email focused.
We tried voice over IP, and it bit us. So I guess we're just kind of confined to it by
Come back to what you know.
Yeah, exactly.
That's funny. So whenever you created Kickbox then, so now you have MX Force running, you have SendInc running, you've tried the VoIP, which didn't work, but then, Kickbox grew out of that. So you
Right.
have 4 entities, one's died.
Hmm.
Again, I mean, you've got so many entities going at the same time. Are you using the same employee base to run all of those?
Yeah, so we created a holding company, and essentially everybody worked for that holding company, which worked really well, and it actually helped SendInc and MX Force as well as Kickbox, because we could hire these really talented salespeople, marketing people, product people, engineers, you name it. And as any of those companies had a need, we could put them over on that particular product and help grow it. So that actually helped propel those older businesses to a level of an exit, while at the same time we had a whole bunch of really smart people working on to grow Kickbox. So that worked out really well. After the exits, we basically rolled everybody over into Kickbox.
And that's really grown because you now have, what, like 15 employees or something?
Yep, about 15, yeah.
Yeah, so what is it that has made this take off so much more and requires so many more resources, so many more bodies
Yeah.
than what you've been doing in the past?
It's funny because they say hindsight is 20/20, but I don't know what foresight is, because the success of Kickbox is a little bit harder to define. I think we went to the market and we had a superior product, and that actually helped a lot. I think the timing was perfect, so there was a good amount of luck involved, and we happened upon a good sales and marketing team, and that was one of the things I was really big on at that point. I had tried the bootstrap approach out of necessity, more or less, but this time I really wanted to invest in sales and marketing and grow that out, and we're still investing in sales and marketing, by the way. So if you're in sales and marketing and you want a job, kickbox.com, go apply. But so we decided we really wanted to invest in it. We had early signals that this company was going places, and so we just went for it, and it worked out.
So that's a very summarized version.
Yeah.
There's got to be way more than that.
Oh yeah, yeah.
I mean, what did you do? I mean, yeah, you hired some salespeople, but
Mm-hmm.
what was it about the product that caught on so much? I mean, you're talking about email verification.
Mm-hmm.
So if I have a newsletter for my company
Mm-hmm.
and somebody signs up for it, what do I care if it's real or not?
Right.
And how do I know?
Yeah.
Do I hire you? And what does that matter?
Right. So strangely enough, it kind of all comes back down to spam. When you're gathering email addresses, be it for your newsletter or when people sign up for an account on your web application, they're giving you an email address, and if you don't confirm that email address is real, and ideally to go an extra step and confirm that they're the actual owners of the email address in addition to it being real, then what can happen is when it comes time to send your newsletter, you have a lot of bounces. And that doesn't seem like a big deal because you can send a million emails for $20, and so why not just let everything bounce? Well, spammers let everything bounce. They just fire and forget. And so when you're sending a campaign that has a high bounce rate, you look to the Gmails and the AOLs and Yahoos and all these guys like you're a spammer. And now your newsletters and transactional emails and everything like that start to find their way into the spam folder instead of the inbox. So that's why that technology is important. And our take on it was a little bit different because when we came into the industry, it was actually a technology that a lot of companies were using to create spam. So you'd buy lists or scrape emails off the internet using bots or what have you, and then verify it so that you could not look like a spammer, but you really were. And we came along and we couldn't stand the irony of creating a pro-spam technology after being an
You're helping these people.
Exactly. So we used some of our anti-spam background to identify what a purchase list is, what scrape data is, what non-permission data is, where you have my email address but I never gave it to you or I never gave you permission to contact me. We built technology that identifies that and we fire those customers, and that protects our network and allows us to have much higher responses than a competitor who doesn't take those measures.
So anybody that buys a list, or as you're saying, scrapes the emails, and I assume scraping the emails is you find emails somewhere on the net and you find a way to grab all of those and then send email to them all,
Correct, yeah.
spamming them.
Yeah.
So your product prevents people from doing that or reduces it anyway.
Yep.
But as the person, let's just say I'm selling insurance. We'll just make something up. I'm selling insurance. I want to get my message out to as many people as I can, and I buy a list with 1 million emails. If I get 30 or 40 or 50% bounce back, I still got my message through to so many. I'm happy.
Right.
But you're saying the more I do that, the more I'm going to be identified as spam, and then I'll have fewer and fewer percentage getting through every time.
Yeah, so it's rarely worth it. I'd be lying if I said you can never make money by sending spam because there are people who do that and companies that do that, but it's very risky to do that and can damage your reputation.
All right, we'll take another break. Be back after the break. Hi, this is Bob Gibbons with Riata Commercial Realty. If your office lease is going to be expiring in the next year or two, the one thing I would tell you definitely do not want to do is exercise a renewal option. Now, that may sound a little nuts. When you negotiate for that renewal option, why wouldn't you actually want to use it? Well, the reason is because while you want to have one as a reservation for your space so the landlord can't lease the space out from under you, that option may not actually work the way you want it to now. It may have made sense 5 years ago, but it doesn't today. The only thing that changes when you exercise a renewal option are the expiration date and the rent. But you may want to do other things like have another option to renew, have an option to terminate or expand. You may want to be able to expand now or have a new base year for your operating expenses. There's all kinds of things that need to be considered. So we recommend that you renegotiate, not renew. For more information, contact me, Bob Gibbons, at TexasTenantRep.com. That's TexasTenantRep.com. Welcome back to The Next Level. We're here with Dan Stevens, Kickbox. You can find them online at kickbox.com. Right, so we were talking a lot about spammers, and if I'm sending out a lot of email, the more I spam, the less likely my emails are actually getting through to the intended place. So that's a big reason why a customer, end user, let's say, is going to want your service. So what does an ideal client look like to you?
Yeah, so for us, an ideal client, it's typically like a marketing department of a company where they've gathered their email list from either people signing up from their web application, if they're a web application, or subscribe to their newsletters and things like that. And what we find is a lot of these companies will have lists that they haven't been sending to regularly, and email addresses go bad, people change jobs, things like that, and that increases bounce rates, which can damage those reputations of those senders. And so we can run that list data, and then we encourage them to plug in our API, which is a real-time API. And so at data capture time, we have the verification product that will say, yes, this email address is real or bad, and then we have our trust product that goes the extra step and says, not only is this good, but this is actually the owner of the email address that just signed up for your application.
And whenever you do that and verify those email addresses, is that something that you're not, are you emailing that person and saying, can you verify that you're really this person? Or is there some technology piece that just does that automatically that you have the special sauce for?
Yeah, so the verification, it leverages our large email infrastructure that we kept from MX Force to essentially check to see if an email address is real without sending an email. And then our trust product is like email confirmation, where it actually does send that confirmation email to confirm that you received the email and that you're really who you are, that you say you are.
So who, in terms of size, what size customer do you need to make it worthwhile?
We have all kinds of sizes, and we have a plan that starts at $5, and then we have customers that are in the 5-digit range as well. So it works across all sizes, really. We obviously we love the enterprise, but the small and medium business guys have the exact same problem at a smaller scale, and we can provide the exact same solution for them.
So if I'm a lowly commercial real estate broker and I'm looking for more clients, or I have a newsletter and I want to send it out to even just 1,000 people,
Yep.
I should still be using this kind of a service to verify that all of them are legit addresses, and that not just that they're legit, but that they really want it.
Yeah. So, I mean, it can't really determine intent. That would be your ESP, like a MailChimp or something like that. If the open rates are really low, then that might indicate that they're not interested in your message per se. So we're more ideally at data capture time, when I've given you my email address at that instance. If I'm real. And then 6 months, a year from now, check in, make sure I'm still around, essentially.
So if I already have my email list with however many names, thousands of names on their addresses, do I bring that to you? If I want to sign up for your service, do I bring that to you, and then you hurt my feelings and you say, no, you don't have 10,000 people on your list. Really, you've only got 2.
Right.
I mean, what does the process look like when somebody signs up with you initially?
Yeah, luckily, since we work with data and customers who have gathered good data from real customers, the quantity of if you brought us 1,000 and you really got those from people who gave you their email address, you should have 900, 850 or so people that are still around, even if it's been a year or so since you last sent to them. So you shouldn't, be wiping out your entire email address. If we only identify 2 good email addresses, and that's a big red flag that maybe you're not really getting data the way you should. Yeah.
So what does this say about people that buy lists? Is the list buying industry, I mean, do you kill them? Do you kind of make them irrelevant? I mean, is there a way to work with what you do and with buying lists?
So we don't want to take a moral stance on it so much as we just don't work with it. I'm not going to say that people who buy lists are doing something wrong. I do think that they're risking their reputation in a very sincere way. And by extension, if they were to bring that data over to us, they'd be risking our reputation, and then by extension, all of our customers' reputations. So we just steer clear of it. It's just too dangerous. You're kind of, playing Russian roulette with your business and your reputation. And there's no real easy way to fix your email reputation. Once the big boys decide that you belong in the spam folder, it's very difficult to get out. So we just don't play with fire, and we don't let our customers play with fire.
So let's say you do get on the naughty list of all the big providers you're talking about.
Yeah.
I mean, so do you have to get to a certain size before they really even bother with you or notice, or is it just sort of like an algorithm that just automatically says, hey, if you get above this percentage of rejects, bounce backs, that you're blackballed from then on?
Yeah, it's so ephemeral. It changes all the time. And so it's very hard to nail down exactly when you're going to trip that alarm, which is why we don't want to get anywhere close to it, and we don't want our customers getting anywhere
Right.
close to it. Yeah.
Interesting. Yeah, I mean, because I know a lot of people that buy lists. I mean, there's so
Yeah.
many list services, and some of them are pretty accurate. I
Yeah.
mean, they have emails in there and fax numbers and everything else, and so yeah, you get sold this idea that, hey, isn't this great? You're going to be able to search and mine this database in all these different ways. If you just want the C-suite, if you want this industry, if you want this size company and this geography, and I mean, you can narrow it down so tightly to where you're saying, hey, I'm really getting my target customer here. But then if you actually try to reach out to them using the tools available through that service, you're violating everything you're talking about and
Yeah.
hurting yourself at the same time.
Yeah, you're putting yourself in sincere risk. Yeah.
So how does a company build a list properly and effectively over time?
Properly is getting people to your website through one way or another, and having them give you their email address voluntarily, or going to trade shows and things like that, and having them write down their email address and say, yeah, contact me about your technology or your service. It's not the easy answer. It sure is a lot easier to buy a million email addresses, but like I said, you're playing with a loaded gun when you do that. So
if you're at let's say I go to the fair of all things, State Fair is going to open up next month. So there's a lot of vendors that are there. They all have the little bucket there, the thing you fill out and you give them your email address. They're going to start sending me email. That's my permission. I gave them permission to email me. I'm still not going to want to look at it probably.
Right.
I'll even forget I did it.
Yeah.
But I get home and I start getting these things. And if I don't say unsubscribe, I just eventually it starts going into my spam filter.
Yeah.
Is their ratio of open much higher than if they'd have just bought that list? Or do you have any way to know
yeah,
that?
I mean, if you're coercing people to give you their email address, and I'm giving it to you because I feel like I need to accomplish a task, as opposed to I'm really genuinely interested in what you have, then the open rates are going to be really low, much like a purchase list. So that's the thing. You have to have explicit consent. Hey, I'm giving you my email address for you to communicate with me. I'm also giving it to you because I actually want to hear from you. And so coercing people into giving you their email address would be similar to purchasing a list where these
Gotcha.
people are like, I don't really want this. And so then the open rates are low, and you're looking at the spam folder. Yeah.
So pretty clearly it's the higher the threshold of consent, the more explicit you are about consent and I'm going to be emailing you,
Yep.
the better chance that they're actually going to open it and want to open it when
Exactly.
they receive it.
Yep.
Interesting. Yeah, the old days of just the more I have on my list, the better is not,
Yep.
doesn't sound like that really holds
It
true
backfires
anymore.
big time now.
Interesting. So what's the biggest challenge in your business?
I think one of the biggest challenges is reaching out to more customers. It's something we've been doing really a good job at, but we are looking, like I said, to extend our sales and marketing team. So that's one of the challenges. Another one of the challenges is the recent privacy regulations and things like that, which we see as an actual opportunity. We were talking about consent. Now these privacy regulations are even more explicit on consent, on how you gather the data that you gather, what you do with it, how you transmit it, how you dispose of it, and that's one of the areas that we're actually really excited about. And then another challenge would be just the reputation of our company, kind of talking about making sure we only take on customers with good data. And if we get lax on that, if we relax too much, we can get ourselves in a lot of trouble and get our customers in a lot of trouble. So always staying up with kind of those curveballs that are thrown our way are keeps us busy.
So is there a lot of government regulation over this space? Like, we have the do not call list for phones. Is
Yeah.
there something similar for email?
Yeah, for the U.S., there's CAN spam. For Canada, there's CASL, and various regulations in Europe, like GDPR. All those are kind of their own can of worms. And strangely enough, they largely from an email address perspective are compliable. You can comply with them by simply just making sure you have permission to send email to the people you're sending email to. And that's really all you have to worry about.
So if you're doing business the right way, you don't need to worry about the regulations.
Yeah.
Seems pretty simple.
Yep.
So what's next? Given your history, you must have 3 or 4 other companies already in the works.
Yeah, I mean, right now we're really I think this is the first time where I just have one company, and it's terrifying. Once I sold MX Force and Send Inc., I woke up basically the next morning, was like, oh, I can't screw up Kickbox now because this is all I have.
More pressure.
Yeah, so it's actually kind of a little bit terrifying. But Kickbox has been growing so well, I haven't really had the time to reminisce around any kind of new technology. So we're just working on growing that, and hopefully someday there's an exit in it for us, and if not, we're going to keep growing it as big as we can get it.
Well, it sounds like you're doing great. So for our listeners, please go to kickbox.com to learn more. Thank you for being our guest today, Dan. Really enjoyed it. And to learn more about the show, please go to nextlevelshow.com. And you can find us on YouTube or podcast by searching The Next Level Show. Be back next week with another great guest. Thanks for listening.